Welcome to the place of rest, where our aim is to give you language that helps you displace the growing confusion, chaos, and dis-ease of our times. My name is Jonathan Boyce, and it's my pleasure to bring to you today's episode. Virginia and Katherine Dang conclude their discussion on the 28 Principles of Liberty. We hope you enjoy today's conversation.
I heard a clip the other day from one of the candidates, and it said, we're facing some extraordinary things today. These profit-making corporations have used their capacity to control our government and to control the media, to turn us all against the most fundamental biological drive that we have. We're destroying our kids, and we're doing it because we're being manipulated to do it through all of the institutions of government. If foreign nations did this to our country, we would consider this an act of war on America. These corporations have been allowed through the profit motive to destroy everything that we value in America. And we have now become the worst country in the world on the key metrics by which every success of a nation can be measured, which is this question: are we giving our children a better future than we have? We need to stop hating each other. This is not economic warfare. This is not chemical warfare. We are all involved in spiritual warfare. It was Robert Kennedy, but I was so impacted because the offense of life, the one universal principle is life. And he gauged this entire discourse around this principle of life. If we can't advance, protect, secure life, we have nothing. So I was really happy to hear that in his talk. That's what stood out to me.
Could I interject?
Yeah, please.
Well, the thing that we have to have a caveat on this is individual life. And we have been accustomed to only a few lives. And that's injustice. And it's the selfishness that is in the greed for money that elevates a few at the cost of the many, the individual. And it's no class struggle. It's each man struggling to live without the oppression of the few. And this is the story of history where we have the violence against individual life, liberty, and his own personal properties, being material or spiritual properties. And so Robert Kennedy Jr. has the right, I think, speech. But see, profit orientation is a matter of principle to corporations. I want to make it clear that we, as an American people, are not corporative. We're not collective. We are entrepreneurial. And it's in every person's interest to be his own business, to be employed by himself. And he can get his learning from being a part of a corporation, but eventually he will seek his own property in himself. And so the richest nation in the world, in the history of the world, is America because of individual prosperity or productivity. Without productivity, there's no prosperity. And so there is a principle of liberty having economic liberty, which America has, shall we say, in abundance. What is economic liberty? It is liberty to enjoy the fruits of your own labor, the work of your own hands, and nobody else. You have exclusive property in the work and the fruit of your own productivity. And we have those who would want to steal our work, steal our products, so that they may have their riches, dishonest riches, which is, again, selfish interest, not self-interest. We have self-interest in a sense that we are in the business of our own selves. Selfish interest is gain at the expense of someone else. We have confused those terms. We have learned over history that what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and lose his soul? And it's the love of money that has entered into our corporate entities and governmental entities. They kind of wash each other's hands. The love of money by those who have not, and the love of money of those who use the plenty they have. So manipulation, you mentioned manipulation, and no one can be manipulated if he's grounded in the principles of liberty. And we go back to the law. You hear a lot, the rule of law. Well, there's good law and there's evil law. So you can't just say we operate by the rule of what kind of law are you living under? Evil law or good law? And law originally is meant for the unlawful, only the unlawful. And law is meant to protect the lawful. That's the reconciliation. And what is good law? You mentioned it just a while ago, Virginia. It is the protection of individual life, not just some lives, because each individual has its own worth, has value.
And I'm glad you brought this up, because therein was the huge discussion we got into with a group of first responders. And I really had to go to bat on behalf of him with the establishment that's deciding he's not ready to go full time because he's going to potentially lose his workman's comp if he goes back to work without restrictions. And I'm saying he can't survive if he goes back with restrictions, because then they're limiting his capacity to work full time to get out of the debt that he got in while he was trying to heal. We don't have that right in the life of this man. So it was an opportunity to apply the deepest convictions that are the spine of rest in advocating for this very principle, Katherine, that you just so beautifully explained. And that is the right of the individual to self-govern.
And to have, again, the work of his own hands protected. That's evil regulation. And I look forward to the deregulation of our property, of the work of our own hands. That's an invisible spiritual thing. Labor is invisible, but you see the fruit of it. And they're trying to restrain and tie our hands so that we are impoverished and depend upon government rather than the work of our own hands. Profit is not the motive of an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur is interested in just putting food on the table for his family. It's natural affection to be an entrepreneur, where you can give your home, your house, your family, your children, your grandchildren, a great inheritance of their own property, not to have to be employed, or shall we say a hireling that just collects wages, because a hireling, an employed person, is working for the wealth of someone else. And that corporations are working for the wealth of their investors. They don't care about the worker. They only care to please the investors that keep them alive at the top. Do you understand? Our government has taken the shape of a corporation. Understand that The Wealth of Nations, written by Adam Smith, I think 1776, the very year we became a nation, is for the wealth of nations. How do these kingdoms, and they were all kingdoms, monarchies, get wealth? Are they going to go conquer? Are they going to conquest and have war to steal from other nations? Or will they be a business corporation? And in the sense that the nation becomes a bureaucratic corporation to sell their goods. Now, the people may be taxed and the people may serve the king, but the king makes wealth for the nation, not so much through war, but through corporate trade and alliances, through commerce. Do you understand? That's a step up from conquest. And we have that going on. But it's a different kind of warfare. It's like economic warfare. It is. coming from greed. That's the spiritual part, is the greed and the stealth and the poverty of others for your own gain. Do you understand? That's why we're battling. They have been stealing from us through taxation where our products can't be sold. Do you understand?
I completely, because in the mental health care space today, I'm up against protecting that property against the institutions for the reason you just described. That's the battle we're having in mental health, is protecting the property.
How we correct this is go local, not national.
That's right.
And we defederalize things that are not to be under the control of government, but local government. Let's go back to the state level. And from the state level, let's just go down to the individual company level, you see?
Completely.
Rather than centralize everything. And we centralize only so that the few may profit, not the individual under that.
And with this, in the tail end of this discussion that we could go on forever because it's so good and it's so rich, Katherine. Let's talk about our 12th principle, which we're going to review this because we discussed it last week. The United States of America shall be a republic. That is a principle. The United States of America shall be a republic. In context of what you just said,
a republic represents the localities. In the largest expanse of a republic, the states are represented in Congress. The state legislatures originally were represented in the Senate. And that's the proper balance between the people and the state governments, protection of both levels of government. And also, as representative government goes down to the city, every city or county is represented in the state government. Do you understand? So it gets down to where the individual is properly represented in his own city, his own village, if you will, his own church, his own business, you see. So we're not a democratic society where we are collective or massively represented. We take care that each individual is not violated or violence is not done to any individual, but there's equal representation, proper representation, elected by the people themselves. It's ingenious.
It's amazing because the true voice of the people cannot be manipulated by a republic as it can be by a democracy.
What it really does, it slows it, impedes it. Whereas centralization is this rapid flooding of power, overwhelming the people as a whole. But this balance of law and liberty in every sphere of government, check and balance, because of the tendencies of every one of us to do harm inadvertently or purposefully.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's genius, really. Principle 13, a constitution should protect the people from the frailties of the rulers. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls of government would be necessary. But lacking these, you must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, obliged to control itself. James Madison.
Excellent. And this is our Constitution. The government has a general responsibility to the whole nation. That's the general welfare. That has been so perverted. General meant not in all the particulars, but in what is good for the whole nation. That's what all their concern is, policies that concern the whole nation, not the states. The states are the particular internal sovereignty to rule itself according to its own people. Now, the 10 amendments were injected because this is what government ought not to do against the individual. So Constitution protects the individual from government, and it also tells government what it is supposed to do for the whole nation. Do you understand? So that's why we don't have states' rights. We have state sovereignty, that we are sovereign within our own boundaries, our own states, so long as we don't contradict the national constitution.
What's the difference between sovereignty and rights?
Rights is something that can be granted, okay? Privileges is a right, or entitlements, if you will. But sovereignty means supremacy within yourself. Sovereignty is self-government. It's called self-rule of those things within that are special to you in your own nation. Whether the occupations of the people, the dominant resources, the rule of its own land, and protection of itself with their own policing, with their own governors, with their own schools. And that's going to be a reality perhaps pretty soon.
Everybody listening to us, you are sovereign you have sovereignty over yourself.
Exactly.
You don't have the right to this and the right to that. Those rights can be taken. If they're given, if you look to government to give you rights, the government can take your rights. But your sovereignty is, we hold these truths to be self-evident.
The right to drive at what age? That's man's given rights. But the right to life, liberty, and property is God-given.
That's right. Those are sovereign rights. They're universal principles.
Universal.
By the way, that's why the world wants to flock to America.
Exactly.
They can't explain it. They can't define it, but they know it.
It's self-evident.
It's self-evident. Principle 14, life and liberty are secure only as long as the rights of property are secure. John Locke. Reason that God gave the earth and everything in it for the whole human family as a gift. Therefore, the land and the sea and the deer feeding in the meadows belong to everyone in common. However, the moment someone takes the trouble to change something from its original state of nature, that person has added his integrity or labor to make that change. Herein lies the secret to the origin of private property.
Your labor entitles you to the property of something that no one else has, but that you can have title to it if it's not previously occupied.
Principle 15. The highest level of property occurs when there is a free market and a minimum of government regulations. Prosperity depends on 4 fundamental liberties, which we have talked about before in the story of liberty: the freedom to try, the freedom to buy, the freedom to sell, and the freedom to fail.
That market people are talking about, this free market, is the market consists of the customers. He or she determines the price, the worth of a good, the worth of the product, the worth of the craftsmanship, and not government pricing things uniformly, because it advantages the labor of those that are of high quality, and therefore there is that impetus to produce well and produce efficiently.
So good. Principle 16. The government should be separated into 3 branches, as you've learned before in the story of liberty. The 3 branches of government come from Isaiah 33:22. For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is a king. It is he who shall save us. And I would add to that, and within his very constitution are 3 parts: executive, God; judicial, the Holy Spirit; legislative, Jesus. Or would you say judicial is Jesus, legislative is like the function of the Holy Spirit in the Trinity? And I know that's not written in these legal documents, but I see that, I measure that, I monitor that, I explain that.
Well, we're made in God's image. I would add, and this is again my understanding, that the king is Jesus, the lawmaker is God, and the judge is the Holy Spirit. Now, let me also say that the founding fathers reason, here it is, the 3 functions of government. See, there's only one government in all of creation and the universe, and God is the government. So anything else is subordinate to that superior government, supreme government. When you think about the functions of government, they are legislative first. The legislative body is the most powerful body, God the Father. All right? And that's why our Congress is the most powerful body. We have the power of the purse. We control the money, and we have surrendered and been, shall we say, corrupted by that, with that power. But the people have the power of the purse, which is regulating expenditures and the activities of government. If they have no money, they can't produce programs and all kinds of experimental investigations, all of that. But going back to the idea that the supreme branch is the lawmaker, he makes the rules. All right. When you play a game, the person who contrives the rules of the game owns the game. And then we have, again, the one who executes the law. And Jesus executed God's law. In fact, he fulfilled God's law to the T, right? He did all things perfectly. And that's what the president is. He's an executive. He doesn't make law. He carries out the law. That's the police force. That's the sheriff. That's the commander in chief, you see. He carries out the laws that the people make. And the judicial, the Supreme Court, means that everything has to be examined according to the written law, God's law. Principles of the judiciary must be equal justice for all, conforming, compliant to the written Constitution. It is not political, partisan, religious. It is blind justice according to the principles of the just Constitution in its original form.
The essence of the Godhead is all the power and the authority comes from God. The inner workings of the soul, I always say, are negotiated in the innermost parts of a person. And then the body carries out in that order.
Yes, exactly. That's true. But notice what we do. Again, I want to help my understanding of what you do with rest. And that is, again, we plan, we decide, right? That cannot be taken from you. That's within you to do. That's your power. You decide. You make your own law. You follow your own law. You carry it out in your body. You do it. And then your conscience is your judge.
Principle 19. Only a limited and carefully defined power should be delegated to government. All others retained by the people. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectfully or to the people.
That's the beauty of our Constitution. We have self-government with national union.
Principle 20, efficiency and dispatch require that the government operate according to the will of the majority. But constitutional provisions must be made to protect the rights of the minority.
The majority or the minority must represent the local self-governing aspects of the individual city, the individual state, and also the whole nation.
Principle 21. Strong local self-government is a keystone to preserving human freedom. Thomas Jefferson stated, "The way to have a good and safe government is not to trust it all to one, but to divide it among the many, distributed everyone exactly the function he is competent to perform best."
Exactly. We call it redistribution of power, not wealth, power.
Principle 22. A free people should be governed by law and not by whims of men, John Locke stated. The end of law is not to abolish or retain, but to preserve and enlarge the freedom for an all the states of creative beings capable of law. Where there is no law, there is no freedom. For liberty is to be free from a strain and violence of others, which cannot be where there is no law.
If you do good, that is, you promote life, protect life, preserve life, there's no law against you. If you do evil, all law is against you.
Principle number 23. A free society cannot strive as a republic without a broad program of general education.
General education has to have its source and root and under the authority of the parents, not the state. The state can only grow a generation to serve the state, but the family, the parents, grow the children to be able to be independent leaders of their own house.
Principle number 24. A free people will not survive unless they stay strong. George Washington stated, "To be prepared for war is one of the most effectual means of preserving peace."
Peace through strength.
Principle 25. Peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations entangles alliances with none, said Thomas Jefferson in his first inaugural address.
Yes. Every nation has its own sovereignty and not to be interfered with by another nation. It's called political liberty, where you are independent and not under the control of another nation, regardless of what you, shall we say, would label your form of government is. Not to entangle yourself in the business of another nation, but doing business with all nations is peace.
Principle 26. The core unit which determines the strength of a society is a family. Therefore, the government should foster and protect its integrity. Alex de Tocqueville stated, "There is currently no country in the world where the tie of marriage is more represented and respected than in America, or conjugal happiness is more highly or worthy appreciated."
Now, that is not something that is to be overlooked, because when God established the nations in Genesis chapter 10, he said, out of the family of Ham shall come their nations. Out of the family of Shem shall come their nations. And out of the families of Japheth will come their nations. So whatever branch of race you come from, we all have the same foundation concerning our own particular nation. And that is the family is the brick of every nation. And all the things that are good in a nation come from the family. All the problems in a nation also come from the families in that nation. But the good news is all the solutions also start in the families of those nations.
Every generation has the liberty, every individual has the liberty to really change, advance, heal the narrative of their own family, bring healing to that lineage.
And that's, again, being fed and raised and educated in those things which are common to all of us.
Principle 27. The burden of debt is as destructive to human freedom as conquest. Thomas Jefferson stated, "We are bound to defray expenses of the war within our own time and are unauthorized to burden posterity with them. We shall all consider ourselves morally bound to pay for them ourselves, and consequently within the life expectancy of the majority."
Our nation's debt, 35 trillion and growing, is a result of not living within our means and living extravagantly, not within our means. And so when I think about our family being the brick or the foundation of a nation, look at the economy of the typical family in America. We're not disciplined in our expenses and in our savings, our investments, in our own wealth. So we've been taught that deficit spending is the proper way to go, but we have not learned to be delaying the future pleasures. So it's a matter of economic education. Again, this idea of replenishing what we use up rather than just keep using, consuming. We have to produce to consume, not consume then produce. That's what we've been doing, paying off debt. And this is, again, principles of liberty, financial freedom. And we haven't been educated as to those factors of life and living. It is death. Debt is death. And it's death to your children because they have to pay that debt sometime in their lives.
Not accidental. Somebody gains when we're enslaved to them. And that's how nations and people are manipulated.
That's right.
This is the final principle they've illustrated. The United States has a manifest destiny to eventually become a glorious example of God's law under a constitution that will inspire the entire human race.
Benjamin Franklin is said to have said that he gave the Americans and the future Americans a republic if they could keep it. And it's interesting is that we're learning how to lose it, and losing it, we're also learning how to restore it, because we're liable to lose it, but in the hope is that we're also liable to restore it through the conscience of the American people. And we are teaching others how to begin a republic such as ours through self-government in themselves. When we lose our self-government, a republic can only stand if the people are governing themselves. If they're not, they will need a dictator. They will need government, excessive government ruling them over them, unless they again begin to grow out of that into obeying their conscience, obeying self-evident truths, living without the violence and injury to others. And so that the world is estranged from these principles, and America is sort of the firstborn republic as ours to teach others what to do as well as what not to do.
The implication, I think, of understanding these principles is so significant, and I'm hoping it's a great benefit to those who are in a tailspin about what we've experienced in this political climate during the last 8 years. Because there's been so much propaganda, so much lies, so many lies, so much deception, so much strong rhetoric on both sides. But truth floats. I always say truth floats. Truth can't be suppressed.
What we're witnessing is, again, our corruption, our own corruption, educationally, familially, in the home, corruption of marriage, corruption of education, corruption of civil, local, and national government. And we're paying a price, and it's a painful price. It's not, people talk about grocery bills. Well, we have to eat. That's the most basic thing of life is food. And we're finding we're going to starve ourselves under this extravagant, shall we say, imaginary fantasy that we are living a fantasy, nothing real about it.
Well, it's getting real fast. In closing, I'll just say this. The founders knew they were on a divine mission.
They were educated from the scriptures. They understood these principles from the Bible.
So good. 28principlesofliberty.com houses all this information and much more. But I'll close with one of their quotes. The founders knew they were on a divine mission. Their greatest disappointment was that it didn't all come to pass in their day. But they knew that someday it would. John Adams wrote, "I will always consider the settlement of America with reverence and wonder at the opening of the grand scene and design and providence for the illumination of the endurance and the emancipation of this lavish part of all mankind for all over the earth. The sources for this material have come from over 150 volumes of the Founding Fathers' original writings, letters, minutes, and biographies." What a great privilege, what a great opportunity to call this home and to invite others to come and make it their home. And the greatest, I think, story that is America is much of what we're living through right now. And it's the conscience of its citizens rising up and saying, this is a bridge too far and a step too many for me to take. Something is wrong here. And we see our own sickness And I think that's the beautiful thing that comes out of the ashes, the heap of ashes. It's a great time to be alive.
Well, we have to realize what we're witnessing and interpret it properly.
Give us a summary of that, and we'll close with your words.
What you just read is we need to go back to first principles and primary sources. The records are there in our history. We talk about manipulating history by supplanting it with and injecting modern thinking rather than of the thinking that founded this nation to give us the liberty to even reject it or speak against it, but only to our own demise. And so we just are thankful that there is a God who is providence, who is looking out and caring for all men and nations, and to have us learn these principles and to teach them to other nations as well.
Thank you so much, Katherine. You're helping expand our worldview in ways that are life-giving. Thank you.
Very welcome. My great pleasure.
We hope listening to this episode has brought you closer to experiencing the freedom of wholeness and healing. If you have questions or comments about today's episode, or for updates about R.E.S.T, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at The Place of R.E.S.T. If you would like more information about Virginia, or to support and join the cause of R.E.S.T, please go to theplaceofrest.com/donate or call 949-289-5935. Thank you for listening to R.E.S.T with Virginia Dixon. We'll see you next week.